While while my computer decides whether or not I'm recording or not, Morbius, you looking forward to the expansion for WoW?
Looking forward. Haven't really thought much about it because I got a bunch of crises going on in my real life. I'm being honest about it.
Okay. My computer's now recording. We can do this. Welcome to Fjook Enterprises YouTube channel, Conversations with Fjook. We haven't done one of these in a long time. I'm your host, Fjook, and with me today is my original co-host, Anthony.
Hello, hello.
And channel regular, Morbius.
Hello, everyone.
Today we are talking about my VHS collection of Bond movies, which is called the Bond Collection. And I want to know how you guys rank the movies. So, as you can tell by the title of this video, we are discussing your guys's how you're ranking these 7 Bond movies. I don't know why the VH collection decided these 7 Bond movies when at the time there were probably 3 times that amount. But they chose these 7 movies.
When did this come out? This set.
Around the video game of the Tomorrow Never Dies.
Okay.
I already know, Morbius, you shared your list with me, and I already know what Anthony's number 1 is, but we'll work our way to that because that's how top lists work. So, what did you guys put as your number 7 favorite of what do you guys rank number 7 out of these 7 movies?
Anthony?
Okay. So I put Live and Let Die. I don't know. I guess it's just I saw it. I think the first time probably in the early 2000s and didn't really think it had aged too well. Wasn't a big fan of the voodoo and that type of appreciation. I know that was a popular thing to do, but I don't know. It just didn't bide well for me for being in the South.
I agree. Typically, classic Bond movies are my jam, but the voodoo themes are not. This movie was made back in 1973, I believe, based on the 1954 Fleming novel by the same name. And the 1970s were the height of what they called blaxploitation era movies, at least in the United States. And as you might expect, this film contains a number of stereotypes common to that particular area. Departing from the earlier Bond supervillain types of megalomaniacs with orbital space stations or undersea submarine bases or things like that, you've got things like the voodoo things that Anthony just referred to. You've got drug trafficking stereotypes. You've got the gang things in Harlem, things that just generally did not age well.
That would probably be on the low end of my list too if I was giving my list, but I'm not. But that's not why we're. But that's not why we're here. Anyways, moving on to number 6. What is your number 6?
So my number 6 was A View to a Kill, or not A View to a Kill. Sorry, my number 6 was Tomorrow Never Dies. I don't know. I think it's one of the weaker Brosnan films. I am a huge Brosnan fan, as you can tell with probably a film that will come up later on. I just think that Carver is a weak villain. his motives are kind of Dr. Evilish, and the fact that, it's all for a 100-year contract with China. That is the whole reason why he is trying to set up this conflict between the UK and China. Although, I think Michelle Yeoh, like, although she's a great actress, and she does a good job. I just, I really feel that, Carver as the villain just doesn't do it. I think that we could redo this, be done better. I'm not saying the premise is bad. It's just I think it just falls flat.
My number 6 pick was also Tomorrow Never Dies. It's a 1997 film, I believe, in which the Bond character is attempting to intercept Elliot Carver. I forget the actor who played him, who was playing a power-mad media mogul type person who was trying to initiate a third world war through manipulation of information. Yep. And the reason I put this at number 6 is because it wasn't really a Bond film per se. There's no high-tech gadgets. There's, no over-the-top, egotistical maniacs trying to do anything outrageous, except for Carver. The film is basically a political statement on the power of global media to manipulate and control information, propaganda, and the news, to essentially brainwash the consumers of the media and influence the political narrative. It exposes the dangers of a free press being purchased and controlled by just a few or even a single entity that may have nefarious intentions. And while I can't really fault the political statement the movie's trying to make, as I said previously, it's not really a Bond film.
Yeah, it's a 90s action flick.
Exactly.
This is going to be an interesting video if you guys have the same ranking on each of them. Anyways.
Anthony, is your number 5 License to Kill?
No, that is my number 4.
So they're not exactly lined up for you.
But I think this also attests to like the quality of the films. Like there definitely is a hierarchy to Bond films.
So
Anthony, what's your number 5?
So my number 5 is For Your Eyes Only. And again, I just felt it was a little, well, so my number 5 and 4 are kind of interchangeable. And again, my number 4 was License to Kill. And I guess it depends on if you want something darker and grittier, or if you want something that, I just find, I find For Your Eyes Only a little bit of the weaker Bond. Like again, this is another one of those films where it starts off oddly with the killing of Blofeld, and then it goes to the boat scene. The boat scene is probably my highlight at the beginning of the film, where they kill her name, Melina's parents. The whole A-tag premise kind of gets shadowed. It's a mess of a film. Or it's a good film. I shouldn't say it's a mess of. It's a good film, but it's got a lot of strings. You have to follow along. Whereas License to Kill is, I find the narrative's a little more straightforward, but and Sanchez is definitely someone that you can hate a little more because he's despicably evil. But it's definitely very gritty, more I think it's probably the gore. Well, other than Daniel Craig's Bonds, I think License to Kill is probably one of the more gorier films.
Oddly enough, License to Kill is my number 5, and For Your Eyes Only was my number 4. And I also agree that they're both equal standing. Like, you could put them either way.
Yeah.
As far as the number 5, License to Kill, that's the 89 movie with Timothy Dalton as Bond, if I remember correctly. That's the one where Bond resigns from MI6 in order to take revenge against the drug lord Sanchez.
Yep.
Who tried to assassinate or ordered an assassination attempt against Felix and his wife on their wedding. Tried to feed him to a great white shark, if I remember correctly, wasn't it?
That is correct. Bites off a leg.
And the reason I put that in my number 5 position is because while it's an action movie, it's not really a over-the-top Bond movie that's classic Bond, because it's more of a war on drugs propaganda piece in the overall telling of the story.
Yeah.
And I put For Your Eyes Only as number 4, which was an 81 film that, as I remember correctly, was based on not a book by Ian Fleming, but 2 of his short stories called For Your Eyes Only and one called Rossico. I think it was Rossico. Bond attempts to locate the missile command system for the British Ministry of Defense that coordinates their fleet of nuclear missile-armed Polaris submarines. And it's a group of, I think they were Greek businessmen.
Yep.
They were trying to steal this, and Bond was trying to beat them to it, and there was the quintessential Bond girl, Melina Havelock. You always got to have a Bond girl that's working with the bad guys that he wins over. I mean, that is traditional Bond. That's why I put it at 4 instead of 5. But other than that, I pretty much agree with Anthony on that one.
So, Anthony, do you have anything to add here? What do you have anything to add on Morbius's number 5, your number 4?
No, and again, like, this is where I think there is a hierarchy to Bond films, and there's some movement around. Like, you can put some films, move them up or down by 1 or 2 on the list, but I think the top 3 are, probably, where there's, for me at least, there's a little more movement. And I think I'm biased with my number 1 pick, so I don't know for Morbius if his number, I don't know what he's ranked or what he's done for his ranking, but yeah, it's definitely where you get in, or when you start watching these films, and what aspect of Bond you like.
That brings up a good point. I'll start with Morbius on this. What makes a Bond film a Bond film?
Well, you've got the traditional Bond elements. You have to have the really cool spy gadgets, the high-tech gear that he gets from Q. That's mandatory for a Bond film. You have to have a Bond girl, super sexy bombshell that James Bond gets to seduce. And you have to have a over-the-top Bond villain. I mean, space platforms, undersea bases, and a base of a volcano, something like that. Something really cool. Something that Dr. Evil tried to parody in those, what do you call them? Austin Powers movies, yes.
Anything else you would like to add, Anthony?
No, I think I agree with Morbius. I think it has to have the 3 Gs: guns, girls, and gadgets.
Exactly.
But don't all these Bond movies that we've discussed so far have hit those 3 things?
They hit the 3 Gs, but I think, again, it's also about a memorable villain. And I think a good Bond or a great Bond film or great Bond villain separates the mediocre Bond films from the great.
Having the media mogul type thing with the Carver character, for example, That's something that can exist in the real world and actually does if you kind of look at it, like with the news networks and things that going on today with the
Yeah.
propaganda news. Having somebody that's going to steal these major diamonds and build this gigantic laser to threaten the planet with, if the planet doesn't surrender to their megalomaniacal, that's the over the top, ridiculous Von villain things that makes it almost science fiction as opposed to just being a spy thriller. Because spy thrillers break into places and take photographs of maps and code books and sneak out and almost get caught. These guys are like comic book heroes. If you forgot your popcorn and you're in a movie theater and you're enjoying the film, it's over the top and you can just let go and just suspend disbelief and ride it out.
Now that we've discussed what makes a good Bond movie, Anthony, what is your number 3 pick?
So I think I could probably just go 3, 2, 1 of mine, and then compare contrast with Morbius. Because none of these films are awful at all. All 3 of these films are great. Each 3 have a great Bond villain. If it's Largo, if it's what's the 006? I can't remember the character's name, but 006. Or, you go with Aldrich Goldfinger. All 3 are great Bond villains, and I think this helps push the films to the top.
All right, let's start with, since we're going up the list, number 3 slot. Let's compare notes there.
Sure. So my number 3 was Thunderball. And again, this is a great film, and I love Largo. But I think for villain hierarchy, Largo is probably number 3, tied maybe with 006. I don't remember who the Bond woman is in this film. But I think the premise is good, like, hijacking atomic bombs from the Royal Air Force. The fact that, the henchman changes their identity to become the French Air Force pilot. I think it's interesting. This is the one with the undersea base, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
It's one of the ones with undersea base.
Yeah, but okay. So I'm pretty sure I have the right undersea base in my head, and I think that's the problem, is that there's a few undersea bases that kind of like get jumbled up when I'm trying to remember based off memory. But like I said, it's a great film. I do enjoy it.
My number 3 pick was GoldenEye because it was not so much a copy or a rehash, but a reimagining of Thunderball. Except instead of stealing nuclear weapons from a British Navy, they're stealing an EMP weapon from the Soviet Union, which was still around back in the day. Otherwise, it played out very similarly, except for the Soviet era T-55 tank that Pierce Brosnan was racing around through the streets.
Yep.
Remember that?
And as 10-year-old, I guess I was 10 years old around that time when this film came out for me with GoldenEye. And like I said, I think it was the second film I had seen. And again, this just captivated me and got me interested in the Bond films. I didn't watch some of the Bond films until a little later. My parents are religious, so action films weren't always welcome at home.
GoldenEye also had I think it was the first time they actually employed it in one of the Bond film series, but the plot twist where Agent 006 turned traitor. That had never happened before in a Bond movie. Sean Bean was playing him, so you knew he was going to die because Sean Bean dies in every movie he's in. It's a tradition.
Yep.
So, if I recall, when you guys discussed your numbers, You both have the same number 2.
Yep.
64 is Goldfinger.
Yep.
Who?
Aldrich Goldfinger trying to Fort Knox. It's to contaminate the gold at Fort Knox using gas. The only reason why I put it at number 2 as opposed to number 1 is is just due to the means that they were going to spray the gas over the base.
Out of the top 3, Thunderball. Out of your top 3, I got a question for you guys. Is Jaws the best henchman?
Henchman?
I think Jaws is the most memorable henchman.
I think probably yes, he is the best henchman because as far as being an overtop villain, he's the overtop henchman. Biting through gondola cables and things like that with those massive metal teeth of his.
Yeah.
So why did you put Goldfinger at number 2, Morbius?
Well, it was an entertaining Bond film that had an outrageous plan for Operation Grand Slam, where they're going to use the knockout gas to put all the soldiers at Fort Knox to sleep and then detonate an atomic bomb inside the gold reserve vault for the United States, making it radioactive for the next 10,000 years, reducing the available gold supply for the planet, which Auric Goldfinger had the single biggest civilian-owned supply of gold, which basically put him in charge of the world, financially speaking.
Yep.
And,
which is a great idea. Just I thought the flying over and spraying gas was a little over the top for me, but again, I love that film. Love Aldrich Goldfinger.
Well, the reason I put it at number 2 instead of number 1 is because when you boil it all down, it's basically a heist movie.
Yep.
And of course, who can forget the flying pilots led by Pussy Galore?
Yep.
Talk about over the top.
So, is GoldenEye just your favorite because of the tank, Anthony?
No, I think GoldenEye for me is my favorite film. Again, I think probably in hindsight, it's probably because it was the first or second Bond film I had seen. Or that I remember. I mean, there's possibility I've seen others before, but it's one that just stuck out. Pierce Brosnan as Bond. I like, even when I look back, like, other than Sean Connery, for me, Brosnan is Bond. I don't know how sacrilegious that is, but that's my take. And I think just the gadgets, the stories, the characters. I loved M when she was introduced.
If Pierce Brosnan is one of your favorite Bonds, why didn't the other Pierce Brosnan movie on this rank higher than last?
It ranked second last, but again, I think it was the way it was done. Again, I think now you could probably make the film a little better in today's environment. Like, yes, it was critical of media back then and their influence, but I think it would be more meaningful nowadays. And again, I think it was treated more of as an action flick that fit that 90s era, as opposed to being like a Bond film, like a spy film, as opposed to being a spy film as an action film.
And Morbius, I have a feeling that your reason why Thunderball is ranked above GoldenEye is the fact that Thunderball was the original and GoldenEye is the copy.
GoldenEye is the copy, but if you look through the history of cinema, you'll see that there's a recurring theme of movies where you've got bad guys stealing nuclear weapons to blackmail the world with. And all of those are either copying, reimagining, or at the very least inspired by the original one that did it all first, and that was 1965's Thunderball with Sean Connery's Bond. They were the first to set the standard for everybody else to follow.
Mm-hmm.
Is that why it's your number one then?
It is. That and the Swedish model they got to play the Bond girl Domino was smoking hot.
That's always a reason.
There are a lot more Bond movies out than what we talked about today. If we did the whole list, would your number one change, Morbius and Anthony?
Out of all 28, 29, or how many there are of them? That's a good question. Let's see. Honestly, I think Thunderball would still be my favorite one for the same reason. That and the fact that when I was a little kid, it was the very first Bond movie I ever saw. I've got a certain nostalgia element for that particular one.
Yeah.
I think my number two would be Moonraker, though. So that was really big into Star Trek and sci-fi back in the 70s when that came out. Plus, I thought Jaws was cool, too, as a bad guy.
Yep.
What would be your number two? And number one?
So my number 1 and 2 don't change. I think Goldfinger and GoldenEye are my two favorite, and I think if they were to ever create another film that starts with gold, it might jump right to the top of my list. I'm not sure. Maybe that's my bias. But my third one would change to From Russia with Love.
I think a top. I don't know where I'd put it. My top three, Anthony. But I've not watched as much Bond movies as you, both of you. But I think those are my top three favorite Bond movies. Are the same as yours. I don't know how I would rank them. But as I said, I haven't watched as much Bond movies as either of you do.
But my oddball pick that I love, and I think it's probably my number 4, is A View to a Kill. I just love that film. It is the perfect amount of campy in a Bond film.
So, my last question for Morbius is: does Moonraker hold up? And for Anthony, does the one that you just said is your oddball pick? Does that movie still hold up today?
Moonraker is dated because it deals with a space shuttle, which was decommissioned back in, I think, the late 90s, wasn't it?
Yep.
It's no longer a thing. It is very much a product of the 70s.
Yeah, definitely influenced by the sci-fi that was coming out and trying to capture a portion of that audience. Again, it gets mocked by Austin Powers, but again, I think that it proves that it did have an impact on our cultural mythos.
Worked its way into the zeitgeist.
Yeah.
And your oddball pick, Anthony, does that one hold up?
I enjoyed it. I saw it probably for the first time in the mid 2000s. But again, I think I have a soft spot for Christopher Walken, and to see him as a villain, I'm definitely on board. Does it hold up? I don't necessarily think so, but I love it as my as an oddball pick.
Thank you both for joining me for the VHS Bond Collection ranking video.
Anytime.
Yep.